I'd just like to introduce Lynn from the BBC. He's going to give what I'm expecting to be a brilliant talk. I saw him and one of his colleagues present at the AGI conference, and they won Best of Show, voted by the audience, I believe.
Yes.
So,
much to our surprise.
Hopefully, it'll be an excellent talk, give you a lot of inspiration, and I hope you really enjoy it. Over to you, Jim.
Okay, thank you. First thing I should say as a bit of a caveat is that everything I'm going to show you these are a set of prototypes that I built for the BBC product innovation team. These aren't real products that the BBC are actively working on. You're not going to see these on bbc.co.uk anytime soon. We are actively out doing a sales job around the BBC, so we would hope that in the future someone will pick these kinds of ideas up and run with them. But at the moment, nothing you see is any kind of guarantee for a product that you're going to see in the future. So just to make that clear. A bit about the beginnings of the project. This project really started with my colleague Rob Cooper, who's the producer at the Product Innovations team. And he saw a demo given at the TED conference of Microsoft's Sea Dragon technology, which they'd just produced, which, as you may possibly have seen, it's quite a famous demo. Which demonstrates a lot of the fundamental basis, the capabilities of the deep zoom that Silverlight can do. Also photosynth and that kind of thing. And he saw that and he was very impressed with it and really quite fired up with what you could possibly do with that kind of smooth scaling, particularly when you apply it to something like maps. At the same time, I'd been playing with Silverlight in my spare time at the BBC. I'm a Windows.NET developer by trade, and I'd been picking up Silverlight for the last year or so from version 1 on. And I'd been putting together a few proof of concepts just off my own back to show to people in the BBC various areas that you can use, a lot of them with deep zoom. Rob got in contact with me, asked me what could you do with maps. Particularly he was interested in what could you possibly do with Ordnance survey mapping, because he was also talking to the Ordnance survey. The Ordnance Survey, wonderful organisation. They've been going for several hundred years, and as the name might imply. They do these absolutely beautiful maps, and one of their kind of cornerstones is the 1 to 25,000 layer. Excuse me, I shall just get one. As an illustration, it's my one prop. So these are the what they call the Explorer maps, which you typically use if you wanted to go cross-country rambling or cycling or orienteering. Beautiful maps, huge amounts of detail everywhere in towns and in countries. And these weren't commonly in use when we started this project. You couldn't get them in many places online. Partly because of the way that the Ordnance Survey were very protective of their property and didn't really want to give them away online. So part of our job was actually to negotiate with the Ordnance Survey as to how much they cost and what we could do with them. But that's really a talk for another time, I think. But what we did get from them is the full image set for mainland UK. We don't get Northern Ireland because Northern Ireland have their own version of the Ordnance Survey, who have their own deals and things, so we hadn't started dealing with them. So everything you'll see is mainland UK. Just as to give you some background on what the Ordnance Survey do with maps, this is the Ordnance Survey grid. It's a simple rectangular grid overlaid over the British Isles. 7 by 11 grid squares, and each of those grid squares is 100 kilometres square. And the Ordnance Survey, they give each grid a grid letter. These are the famous grid letters that all the ramblers love. And you'll see that some of them don't actually have letters. Those are basically where there's only sea. So the Ordnance Survey don't send their cartographers out to map where there's only sea. And each of these squares is then subdivided for the 1 to 25,000 layer to a 10 by 10 grid. Each of these squares is 10 kilometres in size. And this is what we get from the Ordnance Survey. This is a single tile And they supply one of these tiles for every piece of the UK mainland where there's any geography. As you can see, if we zoom in, these are really beautiful maps, very highly detailed, kind of the pinnacle of the cartographer's art, I think. You get much more detail than we're used to seeing in ordinary online maps, which tend to concentrate on the road network. But here you get lovely amounts of detail. So what we got from the Ordnance survey was a big CD with all of these images. Each of these is 7,000 by 7,000 pixels, so that's 49 megapixels, would that be right? Yes. About 5 megabytes each in TIFF format. And so each of the main grid squares has up to 100 squares, depending on whether there's any land there. And obviously, then we have enough to cover the entirety of the UK. That ends up being, if I consult my notes, 2,867 individual tiles, each of them 7K by 7K. There's about 12 gigabytes of bitmap data. And to that, we had to add all of the bits that the Ordnance survey didn't bother to map because it's just C, slackers. So we had to generate all of the tiles around there, which they don't supply as imagery. So that was another 4,833 tiles, giving a total of 7,700 bitmaps. And if you work all that out, unless my maths is completely broken, which it may well be, that's a total image of 377 gigapixels, just for the UK. Now, that might seem like a lot, but actually, if you look at the kind of imagery that you get on Bing Maps on their aerial layer, which goes down to much higher resolution than these, it's almost a drop in the ocean. But frankly, when I started on this project, that was pretty scary. So, first thing I needed to do was turn it into a big deep zoom image. If you're familiar with deep zoom, you might have used a tool called Deep Zoom Composer that Microsoft supply, which allows you to take any number of images and stitch them together. Well, that couldn't quite cope with this number of images at this resolution. I haven't tried it recently, but I think it's still probably outside of their normal use cases. So I had to roll my own application to build it, and it wasn't without its problems. One particular problem I had, which cost me several days, because it would take a couple of days to build the entire image set, because what I'd have to do is take each individual tile, break them down into the kind of tiles that Alistair showed you, the 256 by 256 pixel tiles, and just go across all the tiles, building this huge image pyramid and building different layers. And what I'd find was I'd leave it running overnight, and then I'd come back and it was broken, and it always broke at the same point. And I thought, is it corrupt data? Is it some bug in my program? And it turned out that it was just rather stupidly, the drive I was using was formatted to FAT32 instead of NTFS. And unfortunately, that has an upper limit on the number of files you can store in a single directory. And I was hitting that limit. The program was stopping, giving a very obscure error message. So once I converted that drive, that bug went away, which I was quite happy about. But so eventually, we were left with one single image, which, as you can see, you can play with, zoom in, zoom out, do whatever you want with it. So next, we decided to look at what we could actually do with these things. First thing I'm going to show you is the kind of thing we can do with BBC TV programs. There's tons of programs that the BBC has that take place in the UK. You can think of 10 examples off the top of your head very easily. This one is based on How We Built Britain with David Dimbleby. So if I start it up. So what we decided was we wanted the map to be part of the same story of the video. So as the video is showing the mountains of Scotland, then we do this slow pull into the map. We're using it like it were a piece of rostral camera artwork.
Scotland was a
kind of a Ken Burns effect.
Fought over by warring clans and threatened by invasion from the south, first by the Romans and then the English. Anybody with money and power
as the castles appear on the video,
to protect themselves.
we can show where they are on the map, just to give a little bit of extra information.
Still dominated by their magnificent castles.
And then because David Dimbleby drives around a lot, we thought it'd be fun to follow one of his journeys in the car. So as we pull down into the, as the video pulls onto the Land Rover, we then zoom down and show where the car is on the road. Or at least the journey he would have taken. This isn't actually to scale, he wasn't driving quite this fast.
For Scotland, the image of the castle is so powerful. You find it not just in castles, but you find it in public buildings, you find it even in people's private homes all over Scotland and right down the ages.
And as the music reaches a crescendo and we approach Stirling Castle, we pull back on the map and resize the video, so maybe at this point the video is, we want to have a closer look at it.
Built by the Stuart kings,
It's slightly lower resolution than I'm used to showing it, so it doesn't quite appear in the right place.
At the nation's heart,
As you can see, we can fade out the video here, just in case there's some information on the map you might want to see. So it's just a simple example of how you could take a very short clip and add a little bit of extra information. Just a slightly different way of watching programs, and you can imagine lots of programs being able to be enhanced with things like this. So, and the next thing we looked at was kind of thing that the BBC tends to do quite a lot of. There's a lot of walk programs on the BBC: Wainwright's Walks, Railway Walks, Wall Walks, Kirsty Walk. No. So the idea here is you come to the BBC site, you're looking at the Lake District. This is the Lake District, and perhaps you want to find one of the walks featured on the BBC, or perhaps in future a walk that's been submitted by a member of the public. So we have a look at this, and so each of these walks has a little bit of information about where it is, how difficult it is, how steep, all that kind of information that you'd need to know about a walk. So let's choose the one that starts around Ambleside. And the idea was we wanted to attach various media to various different parts of the walk. So we start off, obviously, at the pub. Always a good place to start. We can put a bit of information there. And as we show the walk, we can nicely animate the walk as it goes along. This is what we call our Raiders of the Lost Ark effect. And so at various points you might want to point out a particularly lovely place, or maybe a bridge that you might miss if you're taking the walk, so you can add a little bit of extra information as you're going along the walk. And as we go along here, it's important to note that this isn't just a movie playing. This is an interactive map with as much UI as you want. You can still zoom around on it. You could still do a search. Let's say you were looking for hotel information, then you could pop up information about a local hotel. And when we restart, we're going to start following the direction of travel rather than keep it pointing north. And what you'll notice is as we rotate the map, the names on the map stay upright. That took a bit of work. The map tiles that the Ordnance Survey supply, normally, they have all the names burnt in. So we asked them as a huge favour if they'd give us just this one tile, this 10k by 10k tile, just without the names on. So they gave us that, and Rob spent a couple of afternoons with a tool that I wrote, going through, painstakingly putting all of these names on by hand with the original map tile as a guide. And so for a couple of afternoons for one map tile out of almost 3,000. So, there's probably quite a bit of work to get this particular feature into a final product. So this isn't something that we promise in any kind of speed. But it shows the kind of thing that we really should be looking for in the maps. We've stopped here to show the kind of detail that the Ordnance Survey maps have. We forget quite how much they can do with this. Even a tiny image like this, tiny little building, is one of these lakeside barns that are dotted all over the countryside. And this is the reason why these maps are really loved by people who are walking in the country, because it makes it a much richer experience, and you know they really are quite beautiful. And that's just coming to the end of the walk. One day I shall have to measure how long this walk takes, because I suspect it will probably take about 4 days. It was built for looking good rather than actually being walkable. So perhaps one day I'll take my young family and walk them all the way around, or maybe I won't. And just to show you on how great these deep zoom photos are, if we zoom in on this shop window, you can just about read the sign in the window. So it's a dog show, in case you can't read it. Just to give you some idea of the kind of depth that you can get in these pictures. So now, those first two demos were ones that I built basically using just the deep zoom image. I had to build a control around it with all of the different navigation. I had to put in the various coordinate conversion systems between lat long and the Ordnance Survey grid system. One of the issues we have with the map is that it uses the OSGB coordinate system rather than the standard GPS or the kind of thing that the Bing Maps control uses. So it's not just a straight fit. But in March, when the Bing Maps Silverlight control came out, I thought I'd have a go and see if I could actually get the map tiles imported into there. It was a fair amount of work. But in the end, not a huge amount of code. So the rest of the demos that I'm going to show you are actually using the Silverlight control, but with our map tile and also our map projection on it. So they're all of the coordinate systems are in Ordnance Survey coordinates. Not that really makes any difference, because you'd be converting between lat long and OSGB anyway. So we do it all under the hood. This is a very straightforward application that obviously everyone does, showing pictures on the map. But we wanted to see whether Silverlight could do anything better than Ajax. One of the things that Alistair was talking about was the limits in the number of things you can have, you can do with Ajax. And we wanted to see if we could address those in Silverlight. So in this example, we've got 295 individual images of some castles and sculptures, all placed on the map. And so what you can see is as we zoom in, we kind of make them nicely appear. So we never try and overlap with a large number. We always try and fit as many as will fit on the screen. And so as you zoom in, you just get more and more detail. That's the kind of thing that it makes it more of a smooth experience. People really. What we found with Ajax maps is that you tend to kind of jerk in. It's like you're not zooming into a level, you're kind of cutting to another level. And with Silverlight, we're trying to preserve that smooth zooming. So everything we try and do, we try and make as smooth as possible. And so every time we zoom around here, we're scanning through the 300 pictures to decide which ones appear. And obviously they all are nice deep zoom images, so we can zoom in on them. They've also got some information attached. We didn't want to clutter up the picture with a lot of titles and informational text, and we thought, well, where do we put the picture? Where do you normally put information on pictures when you've got them? And obviously the answer to that is you put them on the back. So this is some information taken straight from Wikipedia, and as you can see, although because the screen size is a bit small, you don't get the bit at the top. But there's a thumbnail of the map here showing exactly where the castle is, which again is fully interactive. That's just another instance of the map control on the page, and you've got your Wikipedia text there. And we can zoom out. But one thing we wanted to know was quite how far could we go? Because obviously, there's got to be limits in how much information you can actually usefully store. But I wanted to kind of give an idea of what the performance would be like if we had a lot more things. We've already got here 295 images, but what I did was I took the same data set, but randomly distributed copies of them all over the map, so that What I'm loading in now is about over 18,000 pieces of data. A lot of the same pictures, but all distributed randomly across the map with all the associated metadata. It takes about a minute to load in, so it gives you an idea of how much data there actually is. But once we actually get it loaded, we wanted to see what impact it would have having to filter out pictures and having to only show the ones that appear on screen. So if it actually loads in, which I hope it will in a minute, I should be able to show you. There we go. So that's now loaded, as you see, 18,880 pictures. No significance to the number, that's just how many happen to be. And if I just zoom out, you'll see that the performance, as far as the user is concerned, is pretty much identical to how it was when there was only 300. And what it's doing under the hood is it's having to scan all 18,000 pictures every time you change the view to decide, is this picture now visible, is it not visible? Any pictures which it decides should no longer be shown. So if we zoom out, you'll see some of them fade out. We have to wait until that one's faded out before we can put another picture in. So it's doing a fair amount of work, but as you can see, as far as the user is concerned, there's absolutely no jerkiness. It's all very, very smooth. And I think this is where technologies like Silverlight will really come into their own, where they are able to handle much larger data sets than Ajax really can. And, you know, it could be argued that JavaScript will eventually get up to that performance, but you could wait for that, or you could look and see what Silverlight can do. And obviously still got all of the associated metadata and beautiful deep zoom pictures. Another thing that's that we considered with this map is that we've just got one image. We don't have all the different layers that you get with Bing Maps. If we were looking at the Bing Maps here, you'd see the major road network. You'd see lots of place names at a scale at which you can read. Whereas because we're looking at the Ordnance Survey map, you can't read any of the place names because obviously they are massively too small. You have to zoom in an awful long way before you actually get names which are readable. That does cause a problem if people want to navigate over the map. Not everyone knows exactly where they are in the UK, and we use place names when navigating in a map. So we wanted to see if we could just put the names on using Silverlight, just by rendering on top of the map. So what we've got here is we've loaded in a database of 25,000 place names, each geolocated to their particular area. That in itself was quite an interesting job because there's a lot. You can get lots of different data sets of place names, and some of them are geolocated, some of them aren't. But we needed two things. We needed the place names to be nicely located as if they were on a map. And some of them, they tended to round up the lat longs, and so they were all kind of clumped. They weren't very useful. So we wanted the location of the names to be nice, but we also needed to be able to sort them in some kind of sane order. As you can see major cities: Cardiff, London, Birmingham, Liverpool, Louth. So we needed to sort them into order, and what we ended up doing was trawling through the Office of National Statistics for population density for various different cities. We got several different data sets and wrote a whole bunch of link code to munge all this together, to match all the names together, and eventually end up with this 24,000 names to put over the map. And as you can see, it uses exactly the same technique as the pictures. So as you can zoom in, you get a nice effect, and it again doesn't really impact on the performance of the system itself. So last thing I'd like to show you is we wanted to see whether maps could do something to bring the BBC archive to life. The BBC has a colossal archive, most of which currently is unavailable. but there's a big project inside the BBC to make more and more stuff from the archive available online and present it in interesting ways. And we wondered if there was a possibility for maps to bring archive information to life and to add a bit of extra meaning to this. So what we did was we took a map. In fact, it was actually this map here. And we gave it to a researcher, and you can actually see this is the map that she took. And we asked her to go through the whole BBC archive and find every piece of video and audio that she could find that was in the archive related to this particular area. This is just a small piece on the southeast coast. It's Woodbridge and Saxmundham, including Aldborough and Framlingham. Just not a particularly famous area. Biggest claim to fame is that Benjamin Britten lived here. Our researcher Maggie went away and she found about 60 different items in the archive in the end. And as you can see, she's marked up this map with the locations of a lot of them. So I took all the data that she had and all the things she'd found and put them on the map here. And as you can see, if we zoom in, I stole some code from one of the guys who's on the deep zoom team, a guy called Lutz Gerhard. He did these beautiful scaling pushpins. So if we zoom out, you see they get a little bit smaller, but in a kind of an exponential way. So it's quite a nice effect. But each of these pins represents something in the archive. So. And the idea is that if you're going on holiday or for a day trip to a particular area, you could see, you could go to a place like this and you could find clips that you normally wouldn't even think about looking at. If we look at, for example, here there's a 15-minute poem written by Anthony Horowitz, inspired by a painting of Walford Quay. Not something you would necessarily search for in the archive, not something that would necessarily just you'd stumble across, but because it's on the map and because it may be you're visiting Alford for a day, you might spend that 15 minutes listening to something that you'd otherwise not think of looking at. And there's a wide cross section of things here. There's a piece about sculpture. Again, this is from a picture of Britain.
The desperate words of Peter Grimes are captured in this sculpture on the beach at Aldborough.
Actually, quite interesting because this sculpture apparently is not popular with the locals in Aldborough. And there's another piece attached just next to it, where a lot of the locals are complaining about this piece and they think it's an eyesore. But you know, it's a lovely piece of public art. So you'd never really come across this before. Clips from local news programmes, clips from old documentaries. There's some pieces going all the way back to the 60s, and it really shows how by attaching things to real places that people actually have some kind of relationship with, you can give a bit more new life to the items that are in the archive. So that's. We're kind of hoping that the archive will see this kind of thing and take it on board. So that's all my demos. I'm sure I can answer any questions if people have any demos, but hope it's been useful. And thank you.
Certainly got some time for questions if you want to.
Sure.
Jim, thank you very much, by the way. It's been fascinating, brilliant. I guess my question was, as you were doing this, you probably thought of a bunch of things you would have loved to have another month or two to invest your time in doing. I just wondered whether you wanted to share with us what else you would have loved to have done if you'd had more time.
Well, I think the biggest hole in all of these things, and it was a deliberate choice because of the way we were situated in the BBC, is that none of these have any database back end. None of them have any dynamic data going into them. All of these are fed by static XML files. So I think if I'd been doing this project free of knowing how the BBC is set up and knowing what kind of things we could expect the BBC to do for us, I'm not having a go at the BBC. It's just that if you want to run a database on bbc.co.uk, you have to go to another department and make sure that they can set it up for you. So I wouldn't necessarily use the same technology that they would. Alistair's talk, I think, was really quite interesting about the SQL 2008, because I'm a long-time SQL Server user. So if I had a free reign, then I'd have loved to have put a large amount of data into SQL 2008 and looked at things like data streaming. The 18,000 pictures example was I have to load in all of the data at once, which obviously that's not a good user experience because it takes over a minute even on my local machine, and would take even longer if you were on a broadband connection. Whereas what you'd actually want is you'd want those little bits of data, as Alistair showed, you'd be streaming smaller chunks of data as you're going. So each time you move the map, you make a quick call to the database, get a small amount of data back, show those pictures, but also cache them as well, because we can cache large numbers of pictures. And you'd have the same smooth experience, but it would be more dynamic. And you'd be able to look at much larger data sets. You could look at 1 million pictures, for example, and still get the same kind of effect. That's the kind of thing that I'd like to have been able to do, but it wasn't really the kind of thing I could practically do, because I couldn't second guess what kind of database technology we would use in the end. All of this is, as I say, it's all in the UI. It's all about how to present things to the user. And in a way, we're kind of database agnostic. We should be able to use anything that's set up. And whenever the BBC produces a big geo-enabled database, this kind of thing could sit quite happily on top of it. But that's the big one, I think. Everything else we kind of had a go at trying. Yeah.
You've obviously used the Silverlight app control a lot and sort of pushed this in ways and perhaps it wasn't intended. What features would you like to see introduced in the next release of the thing like Silverlight control?
Speak louder as well, because we'll get it.
I don't know really, because I was really only using it in actually quite a small thing. I was. If I were a user coming to it straight, I'd probably want to have the kind of things that I've built here available out of the box. You know, everything that pops up, everything that appears, everything that's tagged here, I've had to write code to do. And a lot of the things that you get for free and you don't think about on the Ajax control, they're only just coming into the Silverlight control. So I think from that point of view, having a wide range of interesting data visualizations would probably be good. Maybe an ecosystem for that. I know that one of the nice things about Bing Maps is that they're trying to open up a whole kind of developer ecosystem with data layers being available, and you can slot in any kind of data you want. So that kind of thing is really quite cool. One of the things we talked about when we were developing this was doing exactly that, having the ability for anyone to come in and write a widget that could go on a map, and people could choose which widgets they had on their particular page. And there were lots of ideas that we didn't really go to. We had a great visualization done by a motion graphics artist about how to allow people to enter opening and closing times for local gardens, for example. That was one of the use cases. We never built that into a demo, which I kind of regret. That's another thing I would have liked to have done. But it's the kind of thing where you can use Silverlight to make a very kind of drudgery, boring data entry job actually quite fun. One of our mission statements in this, as we were preparing to turn it into a real product, which we haven't yet done, was that even though a lot of the stuff that we would build would be for people inside the BBC, so producers who were cutting clips together and creating presentations and tagging the data, that should be as much fun as possible. It should be entertaining and it should be interesting to do that. It shouldn't be typing lots of data into a database or creating an XML file, which is the way that a lot of people have to do it at the moment. You have to hand code your GML files or your KML files. So we really do want. We were thinking that it was our job to make everyone happy about geocoding. Rob was saying to me just today that your mum or your gran should be happy to go to a map and start geotagging things to maps, and for that to be a pleasurable experience and for her to get something out of it. And you don't see that a lot on maps at the moment. And I think because Silverlight's just a little bit more shiny, maybe there's a chance that we'll get more people using it.
Just thinking about really successful projects that use mapping like that, there tends to be three components: technology in the middle, databases behind them, and audience need. Now, you've got some really cool technology going on, and you've sort of tackled the database issues by sort of hands doing the technology rather than trying to tackle the data issues in the BBC.
Sure.
I'm just interested what your thoughts are on the audience need for this type of technology, because there is a danger that it's technology driven rather than audience need led. And whether you're going to do any audience research on mapping requirements.
Possibly, but it's a slightly contentious statement. But the audience doesn't always know what it wants, and if you ask the audience every time you wanted to build something, you just build what everyone else was building, and you wouldn't go any further. So, in some ways, we are the audience as well. People building these things, the really successful products that you see tend to be built by people who need to do that, and then who build the product that do it, and then that becomes something that everyone can not do without. And so, not necessarily to denigrate audience testing, but some of these things they are almost no-brainers. If you've got information that's geo-enabled, you put it on a map. I mean, and we know that. Everyone here is doing that all the time with the Ajax control and things. Really, this is not doing anything different. This is not doing anything different to the Ajax. It's just using a slightly newer technology to give a slightly different experience. We think a slightly nicer experience. The ability to handle a little bit more data. So this isn't a step change. None of this is. This is just a slightly brighter coat of paint on what everyone is doing. And in fact, as I said before, one of the things that I regret is that we didn't do more work in terms of looking at real data sets. Because people like yourself and lots of other agencies have huge amounts of data. There was one demo which I haven't shown, which talks about taking existing data sets, sites of special scientific interest, parks, waterways, things like that, and being able to use those in association with other things. So, the data is very important. I think, to be honest, the audience need just is there. It's, this is data that is trying to get out of all these repositories, and the map is the surface on which all of this data can be exposed. And that's the way we look at it. It's not really anything. I don't think you get, if you ask people, is this good or bad? I think, would people say this is bad? The audience need. I think almost. Maybe I'm just assuming. I might just be making an assumption here, but I think it's obvious.
We're going to have to stop the questions there, but okay. I'm sure Jim will hang around afterwards and we can have a bit of a chat.
Sure.
But yeah, that was brilliant. I hope that inspired you as much as it inspired me. Right, just before we finish up, just a few things just to go through. Those who arrived a bit later, there's some, can't really see that, some feedback forms just for us to get an idea of what you guys want out of a user group. This user group is meant to be about us coming up with ideas about what we want to do, how we want to do it, where we want to go, when we want to do. So it'd be brilliant if you could all, if you haven't got one, collect one of these. And if you have got one, if you could fill it out and potentially leave it at the door with Carla, perhaps, hopefully. That'd be brilliant, because it'd give us a really good sort of feedback and chance to start planning what we do next. The slides should hopefully be online later on. The video will be on when we can get it on there. But please keep an eye on the Ning site over the next couple of days and weeks while Jim shows off. And we'll add some more stuff on there. It'd be great to get some discussion on there and some of you have already posted some of the projects you're working on and some screenshots. It'd be really good to start building a community in between these groups. Just talking about use groups, I'd just like to ask Mark if he could come up a second and tell you about the Silverlight use group. Hopefully from Jim's talk you've got a real inspiration for what Silverlight can offer for you and the kind of things you can do. So Mark's group do a lot of great stuff telling people about what's coming up and what's available.
Oh, I get a microphone.
You do.
Right, okay. My name's Mark Mann. I run the Silverlight user group. Even though the Bing user group came up and I thought, great, visualization and GIS data, you saw quite a lot of this was all around the Silverlight control that came out from Microsoft. So today, actually, I published the next agenda for the next Silverlight user group, which is on the 3rd of February. It's here, also hosted by Microsoft. We've got 2 Microsoft guys coming along. We've got Mike Tolte, who's one of the developer platform evangelists, and he's going to be talking about Silverlight and Meth, so that's going to be a bit more deep dive into Silverlight technology as itself. But then I've also got Yannis Quebec, who's going to come and actually give us an introduction to Bing Maps and the Silverlight control as it is. So unfortunately, Johannes wasn't in today, was he? So if you'd like to come along to that, the details, the best way, yeah, so I'll post them up on the website. You could probably also find me, I'm the llama. Out of all the avatars.
The only reason he didn't win the competition is it wasn't a picture of him.
Exactly, yeah. I don't have the pointy up ears, but and I'll put the links on there. We also use Twitter quite avidly, so if you're not already following me, I am Mark_Man, 2 N's on my surname, or you can look for our hashtag, which is SlugUK, or one word, and that's got links to our agenda and any other kind of like Silverlight related kind of like resources that we do. And I hope that, you know, we're not treading on, the Bing Maps toes or vice versa, but, you know, we're in partnership together and we're just trying to promote Silverlight and Bing Maps at the same time. So, nice to see you to come along if you so desire. So, thank you very much.